Hello everyone, welcome back. This is going to be a quick Q&A video. We have Dead Tom from the Discord server here. He's going to be asking me some questions, and we're going to be answering them, and we're going to be playing a little bit on the dev version of the game in the background while we do that. So say hi, Dead Tom.
Hello.
Alright, so let's start with question 1. Before we get to that, I will say I spawned up the cliff in a tree, and I fell, and we lost most of the hit points from that. So if you're wondering what's going on there, and I broke my leg. That's cool. That's fun. All right.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. Seems to be. All right. So what's the first question we got?
All right. We're going to do the patron questions first.
Okay.
So people who donate to your Patreon. From JRan, Socks Groove Nicely, we have, are there plans to make the warmer/equatorial areas more difficult to live in?
Yes. Yeah, there are some plans for that. So I have some ideas. I do like to start by thinking about historical challenges, because I feel like if we start, like, I'm not trying to make this a historical simulator, but if we start from something that feels reasonable, I think that is a bit of an easier sell. And so if we're starting from that perspective, we might start thinking about things like faster food decay, because that was definitely a problem in very humid climates like you find around the equatorial regions. Food is going to go bad a lot faster. Obviously, we don't want to make that, just a super annoying feature to work with. And there are some ideas that I have about how food decay might change. So there's that aspect, especially when I think we might have it that cold weather might have a much more significant impact on food preservation. So in northern climates where you do have temperatures that drop to, freezing or near freezing, that may actually be very beneficial to how food preservation works. And we'll talk about that more, because right now I think people have observed that there's a certain point where food kind of becomes trivial, and especially with farming. And I definitely want the food systems in the future to focus a lot more on food preservation mechanics, rather than just like the micromanagement of just using your knife to skim the decay off all the time. Like, it is kind of nice that you're not just forced to deal with your food rotting away when you have that mechanic, but at the same time, I think there's an issue where, like, that just starts taking up all your time, and you feel like if you're not constantly worrying about skimming the decay off, that you're somehow like losing out. Like, it's too punishing not to be constantly worrying about it. Yeah, so basically, other issues we'll pause it just to talk for a sec.
Okay.
Just pausing the game because while I think about this, yeah, I think we'll have maybe not necessarily more predators, but just more things that could go wrong. Maybe we'll have diseases. I'm not sure about that necessarily. But definitely for humans in hot tropical places, disease is an issue. Things like, in real life, malaria, we don't necessarily want to do that. That sounds like a pain in the butt, especially because a lot of those things are pretty lethal, and you don't just want to have it kill you. But we are going to look into more like health aspects of the game going forward. Things like medicinal herbs and ways that you can treat things and deal with those obstacles. But yeah, right now it does feel like living in a tropical region is just better than elsewhere. Okay, hope that answered the question to your satisfaction, Jran.
All right. From Finest Shape, we have, what is your process for making decisions of realism versus simplicity versus, I guess what he means is their like difficulty of implementation or how they're implemented. Is because it just said implementation was the last word.
Yeah, that's always kind of hard to answer. So I do like to go for a little more realism when I can. I want it to always be in the pursuit of having like a fun and enjoyable game, though. Like, I'm not just trying to make a simulator that punishes you for no reason. Like, if I can use something historical, realistic to make an interesting game mechanic, then that is something I'm very interested in. Rather than just doing something that punishes the player. Hold on. Wait, is it? Yeah, there we go. So that is, I mean, how do I make that process? Well, the process is probably something like I'll talk about a feature, bring it up with the community. I'll talk with you about it, that go over it. I'll try to think about it from every angle. Try to think about implications. What is that going to mean? Are there going to be some like unforeseen consequences? And I'll probably spend a few weeks or months going over it. How difficult is it going to be to implement? Is it likely to have a lot of bugs in it that are going to be like a pain in the butt to chase down? Things like that. And eventually, is it going to move the gameplay in a direction that I like it to move in? Or is it going to force people to try to avoid the mechanic entirely? Because if most people just find a mechanic so annoying to deal with that, oh, look at that broken texture, that they just want to try to cheese it to get around it, then that obviously is just not going to work out in the long run. So for anyone wondering, in this update we are updating crop textures so that they will blend in to the texture of the grass, so they don't stick out so much. It still looks like a work in progress though. So that's being worked on. All right, what's the next question?
From Alradon, I don't know how to pronounce it. What changes to metalworking are upcoming?
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's a big one.
Like I said, some of these questions are going to be potentially 20-minute videos of their own, and some of them are pretty quick.
Yeah. So changes to metalworking. I think first and foremost, the next big change to metalworking. Don't want me placing bushes like that. Is going to be so the smithing update. There's going to be tons of stuff that comes in the smithing update. For metalworking and just working with metals in general, we're kind of changing the early game a bit, where the ore that you find on the ground is going to get much smaller. It'll be little grains of ore around a unit in size, rather than the 10 units you get now, except on riverbanks. So riverbank is a biome. If we look here, we're in the riverbank biome. Riverbanks like this, you will find full nuggets, mostly of native copper, maybe native gold. Although the native gold nuggets might be smaller. So the idea being that also the new spawning mechanics already have people spawning on rivers. Whenever possible, you spawn on or very close to a riverbank, just because riverbanks are a nice flat area near water, a good place for farming, and is where you're going to find your metal. So that just helps ensure that you have some of the resources that you might need. So you're going to want to look for riverbanks, get those metal nuggets, and then those nuggets are what you're going to use to process into your first tools. Another change is that not all tools are going to use 100 unit ingots. So like a knife might only be 50 units of metal to make. There's going to be changing to metal casting, where it's going to be much more lossy. So the amount of metal that it takes to cast a tool will not be the same amount that it takes to forge that tool. So if you do take the extra effort of getting your copper, putting it on an anvil, and hammering it out into the shape of a knife, you will actually save metal as opposed to casting it. There are going to be some changes to how metalworking works on an anvil. Specifically, there's going to be, the process is not just going to be moving a little pointer on a line back and forth. There's going to be a 2D grid that you're going to move the pointer on. There's going to be multiple steps in the process, typically. And there's going to be degrees of success. So depending on how skillfully you are able to work the metal, that will, like, you'll get like internally there's a score that will be generated for how well you did, and that may give you bonuses or penalties on the effectiveness of the tool. If you're casting a tool, it's always going to count. That's the play down here. Yeah, looks like it. It's always going to count as like kind of the lowest quality. So, because it's just a pretty rough job if you're just casting it. And then after the forging process, there'll be a step of sharpening your tools. There'll be like a grindstone later, or like a kind of a whetstone that you can use to sharpen and refine the tool. There'll be a little mini game associated with that. So when you cast a tool, you're still going to have to sharpen it. It's going to be pretty rough. Looks like we're getting close to nighttime here, so we should set up a little shelter. Yeah, some gravel for that. Okay. All right, okay. So that's how that's going to work. Other changes, because there's a lot that's going to be going into the system. So there's going to be a new system outside of the pit kiln for early smelting. The pit kiln will still work, but only for native ores. Pit kilns don't have any, there's no chemical reaction happening, you're just heating up the metal. So native copper will work in the pit kiln, native gold, native silver, native platinum, although I don't think you could ever get the fire hot enough for platinum. Those will still be meltable in the pit kiln, but there's going to be an early sort of clay mud furnace, kind of like a precursor to the bloomery, might still function as a bloomery, that will be needed for any sort of ore that is a metal mineral. So like iron ore, like hematite, limonite, magnetite, could be malachite, copper ores, tetrahedrite. You're going to need a special kind of furnace that has an air intake, because it's usually often either using oxygen or carbon from charcoal to separate, like it's usually a redox reaction, where you're going to reduce the ore to its metallic state. So that will be kind of mid-late Copper Age, Bronze Age technology. It will not require, I don't think it's going to require metal to make. Well, I'll have to see how that works out. It'll probably be a more efficient way of smelting copper as well. The pit kiln will really be something that you mostly do early game if you don't have the resources to do this this kind of, I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. Maybe the smelter is what that'll be called. The way that the tech progression goes as well, yeah. So the bloomery is not going to require all these bronze sheets anymore, because really a bloomery doesn't require bronze. Like that was kind of an artificial limiter that was implemented just to make it so that you couldn't go straight to ironworking from the beginning of the game. But there's going to be other ways that we do that, right? So historically, the reason that almost universally copper and bronze working came before ironworking is that copper and bronze is a much lower temperature to work them, and the process of reducing the ore into metal and working with it is much, much easier. So the temperature you work at is much lower. The availability of the ore is much greater. It's often you can find the metal natively. And the process of refining a bloom into workable metal is actually very difficult. It took centuries for most peoples to achieve that. Now there is one exception, West Africa, which probably were the first culture to develop ironworking, seem to have done it independently without ever having copper working first. Some evidence of ironworking in West Africa from around 2200 BC, which would be the earliest, I believe, the earliest known non-meteoric ironworking. Meteoric iron is actually easier to work with because it is often in its native form if you get it quickly enough after the meteorite hits. But that's rare enough that I don't think that's really worth putting into our game. So we're going to use the new, the soon to be implemented talent system, where you'll use the experience levels you get from killing monsters, other aspects in the game, cooking food, eating high quality food, drinking alcohol. That will earn you experience points. Typically, experience points increase your hunger and thirst maximums and increase your maximum health, but you'll be able to spend them to unlock talents. Some talents will unlock cosmetic recipes. Some talents will unlock useful benefits and buffs, like increased damage with a certain weapon type or increased weapon speed with a certain weapon type. Or in this case, there will be a talent that enables you to refine an iron bloom into wrought iron. So if you find iron ore early in your game, you will be able to produce an iron bloom, but you won't have the skill necessary in order to process it. So that talent will require a minimum general smithing skill in order to unlock, and a certain amount of experience. So there will be, like, you'll have to have spent some time working metal in order to unlock that skill. And then one other change, because I know there's so much we're talking about. One of the changes that I believe we're going to move to a system where non-native ores have to be ground down. Currently, the only way to grind down ores would be in a quern. We might add an earlier Stone Age version of the quern. But in order to get, like, you'll have to grind it into like a dust or a powder, because that is really how ore was worked in the old days. You need to get the maximum surface area on the ore in order for the carbon or oxygen to be able to access the molecules and reduce them. So you want to have as much surface area as possible. So that'll be that change. And then there'll be a change with the blast furnace where there's going to be like a separate kind of there'll be a furnace and a blast chamber. The furnace will have super hot air. You'll have bellows that will force the air through the furnace, which will superheat it, and then into the blast chamber. So there'll be two separate parts of the blast furnace, and that will be how you'll get your pig iron to make steel. Okay.
Okay. This one, nice palette cleanser. Do you have from Christy? Do you have a favorite bug?
A favorite bug? Like
not as an insect.
Okay. Yeah, my favorite bug was the giant javelins that the spirit skeletons used to have. In fact, I liked that one so much that I implemented it into the game. There's a little Easter egg. That was probably, I think, my favorite one. Because it was completely unintentional and I thought really funny.
Yeah, we get a question about it probably every other month or so.
Yeah.
Which is pretty funny. Okay. And then from QB79, will ore generation in general be changed considering that there is a new system for coal?
Ore generation in general? Not sure about that one. I don't really have any plans to do that. Like the coal, I like the coal seam, that's because coal is not formed in the same way, right? Because coal comes from layers of organic matter that were laid down in swamps and stuff. So the fact that you get just a big thick blanket at a specific layer in the rock that makes sense. But minerals are deposited in a completely different way. Like typically, I think by water running through rocks and cracks, ancient rock beds. Now, I will say that banded iron formations do happen in big sheets because they were formed like a couple billion years ago when newly oxygenated ocean water from the emergence of cyanobacteria caused iron oxides to precipitate out of the seawater. So those do form in huge sheets. So that might be like, so I think typically hematite or banded iron formations, that might be actually like a similar mechanic to the way that coal works. So that might be a thing I do. I'll have to see. I'd have to do more research on banded iron. I'm not super familiar with that. So I would. Oh, it's actually morning. But if I knew more about that, I think I could give really a better answer. So yeah, maybe. Other than something like that, probably not.
Okay. From Society Figure, what are your plans for ruins?
Ruins,
I suppose,
okay.
if any.
Yeah, so I do actually have some plans for ruins. Probably we're going to focus on updates that are mechanical. Yeah, before we get to anything like that. But I do have some plans for ruins, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Right now or never?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to get some of my food cooking here.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
so
not. I'm not watching your stream. So.
yeah, no, I'm not. Well, we're not sharing my screen right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, so in terms of ruins, I have talked on the Discord extensively about the plans that we have for the Nether, and we're not going to necessarily get into that whole thing right now. But I think suffice to say that I do have some plans for the Nether. We are going to have a lot of monsters be heading underground, with the exception of there will be on the surface tumuli or barrows. So small chambers, maybe with cobblestone or other kind of stone interiors that will have some treasure in them, and they will spawn skeletons. And inside there will be a burial of a sort of boss undead monster. Not entirely sure how that's going to go. And until you kill the boss, it will that will be what stops skeletons from spawning there, or skeletons or zombies or whatever it is. And there will be some sort of MacGuffin or multiple MacGuffins that you'll have to get from various tumuli, possibly from different regions. Possibly there will be some sort of crypt underground later on that you'll have to deal with in order to get access to the items. There will also be some other items in there. Potentially, there may be some cosmetic items that are not unlocked through talents, or are unlocked through talents, but requiring a recipe or an item that you could find in one of these burial chambers. So example items might be a recipe for a machete, which functions as both a sword and a scythe, or a sword, a scythe, and a knife. So it has the damage output of a sword, but it also has the leaf trimming and grass cutting abilities of a knife or a scythe. So kind of combo weapons like that, which I think just might be interesting, combining the capabilities of multiple other items so that you maybe save inventory space. Yeah, so not sure. There's a number of systems that are going to get implemented before we get there. Probably so the talent system, carpentry system, smithing update, cooking update. Those will probably all come before any work on structures like that.
Okay. This one got asked by a few people, so I just combined it into one. Is there more optimization to be done for trees, specifically branches for conifers and the pass-through that can happen on trunks, like when you can't hit it because you're not aiming in the right
So there potentially there could be a lot of work there. I mean, yeah, we'll have to see how easy that ends up being. I think we could probably see some optimization with the code. I mean, I'd really have to dig in more to how the vanilla side does it. Probably, I mean, I have seen some success with pre-calculating certain things. in other areas. So we may be able to change some of these into some pre-calculations that'll help out. That's not necessarily my top priority right now, simply because there's just like a lot of other features I need to work on, and I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to be the biggest like return on time investment at the moment. Because I know that's going to be a lot of work, and there's not sure when we'll see the benefit of that. So I'll say, like, I definitely know that there is more work that could be done, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the top priority right now.
Alrighty. And then now these are non-Patreon questions. So from Uncle Strelkov, is bog iron a possibility?
So I'm not super familiar with bog iron. I think it's actually a form of limonite.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, with the way that the worlds work, and I believe bog iron is actually a very low grade source of ore. I know it was typically used in Scandinavia, but because there was not an alternative, it's really not the best source of ore. I don't really think we're in a position where iron ore is so unfathomably difficult to find. Like, if you're in a real life area where you don't have sources of iron within like 20, 30 kilometers of you, 50 kilometers of you, then sure, like, you don't have the trade network access to import it, then yeah, maybe bog iron's a good option. But I don't think you really have that problem here. Like, I don't think you're ever more than a kilometer from a source of iron in TFC. So, implementing something like bog iron, I feel like doesn't... Like, I feel like that is a case where you're just implementing a feature that doesn't need to be implemented. Like, it's cool. It would be like a cool kind of source of iron, but if I made it like, comparable to the real life version of its efficiency, I don't think you'd ever want to do it over just mining the iron ore out of the ground.
Well, they can always donate to the Patreon and force your hand.
That's always an option, yeah.
That's how we got mangroves. Those are the best. So
mangroves were really fun to implement, though.
Oh yeah. All right. He's changed his name like 4 times since, but it's the Snarky Knight. What is the current list of? So actually, I'm going to come back to this question because it's big. So from the Argent Maid, will there be early steam power with potential stuff it entails like pollution?
Pollution would be difficult. I think we're already kind of pushing the limits of what the 1710 chunk data can handle. And there's still a lot of mechanics I want to implement relating to... I think we actually missed out on some blackberries because I broke the bottom one. With animals and stuff like that, so pollution might be a little difficult to implement. I think there may be, yeah, steam power is kind of towards the late game of where I'd like this game to go. But I don't think that pollution really makes sense on the scale of the game. That's what I'll say. I don't really see what the benefit would be.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your plans for steam power at all, or?
That's going to make this video even longer than it already is. We're already at half an hour in, so
okay. All right. Move along. All right. From Loki Log, are there any plans to make caves more interesting / give the player a reason to explore them beyond just finding the exposed ore?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, all monsters are going underground. If you want to get to the Nether, which is kind of where like the late game of the game is going, you will probably be required to go underground to look at some of like the structures that generate down there in order to access it, because late game equipment is going to be locked to the Nether. Late game metals like red and blue steel will only be accessible with materials found in the Nether. That's kind of what I'm doing, is I'm going to split like real life metals and kind of our fantasy made-up metals, the fantasy made-up stuff, red and blue steel, black steel, is going to be locked to the kind of mystical dimensions, like the Nether, so that the overworld is just limited to like real stuff. But that said, there's also going to be some other stuff that's going to happen underground. Planning on having a special kind of cave tunnel generation, which I'm going to do a little bit of research on it, but basically because right now, like, ore veins are not very common. So having a cave that goes through one is not very common. Also, if your cave goes through the ore, you lose a ton of the ore. Like, it just carves out a huge chunk of your ore vein. So the veins that you're likely to find with a cave system are going to be easier to access, but smaller than ones that you'd get other ways. Anyway, this new form of cave generation is going to generate the ore, like, specifically. So, like, when it'll be just like a single tunnel in your cave system will just it'll pick an ore that can generate in that region. It'll convert the stone, like, right on the outside of the tunnel into that ore. So it'll be kind of like the type of ore vein that's only found by in caves. So it'll be a specific reason to go down into caves. That's the plan right now. I don't remember where I put that.
Alright. It's a Chinese symbol. I'm pretty sure it's the word for red. In the future, will armor smithing require processed textiles? I.e. like sewing leather strips or whatever.
Yeah. So leather straps will be a part of iron working. I'm not sure if he's talking about like gambesons or something, because I do have...
I think he means like buckles, that kind of sort of thing.
Buckles?
Well, you know what I mean, like the straps between armor or to strap to yourself or whatever.
Yeah, there will be some leather straps required in the smithing update. We're getting kind of like a redo of how all this works. I should have put a marker down of where I put my base. It's not there, is it? I'll just follow the riverbank. Could be south still, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Broken leg's gone away. Yeah, so there will be... So he said textiles. Textiles makes me think of like cloth or leather.
He says sewing leather strips or fabrics to complete a set. So I don't know how much fabric.
Yeah, leather straps will be required for armor. And there's going to be gambesons and stuff like that as well.
All right. From Nobody Knew, what are the 3 currently prioritized features?
So right now, here we go. Right now, working on redoing how barrels work, changing the mechanics around how water works, or like how water interacts with excuse me. The barrel rework is changing how fluid works using the forge fluid system, allowing multiple stacks of items to be in a barrel of liquid at the same time, potentially adding NBT data to fluid stacks so that you know, when you process your beer, maybe it has like different flavor components based on like how dark you roasted the malt, things like that, which I think that'll be fun. That'll also involve like kind of a redo of how a lot of the barrel recipes work, because right now it's kind of a janky system, not super happy with it. Barrel capacity is increasing. This update also has the whole weather mechanic change, where rain happens not globally anymore, so that's kind of fun. But after that, I think the next system that has to be implemented will be the precursor to the talent system. And once the talent system is in place, then I believe the next two features after that, probably not cooking. Cooking, well, okay, we'll say maybe cooking. We'll say cooking and smithing, I think, because those will be the features that I think interact the best with the talent system. I think the talent system is quite necessary for cooking, smithing, and carpentry, which are the next three major things. I mean, there's so much I'm going to change. There's animal stuff I'm still working on. Like, you know, we'll see. I think smithing is going to be kind of soon, though, after the talent system.
Okay. From Eaton 975, how far away is implementation of Australia/Oceania?
Yeah. There's another one. Yeah. So, like,
and specifically eucalyptus trees, apparently.
Yeah, he actually has messaged me a bit about those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is something I have been tossing around, ideas of how I want to implement it. So, yeah. Yeah. Been thinking about this a lot. So, I do want to implement Oceania because I think that'd be a lot of fun. One of the issues with implementing Oceania as a region is that, well, if I add a new region, so if I make 5 regions, so currently we have Americas, Africa, Europe, Asia. If I implement Oceania, that would totally force a map regen everywhere because all the currently existing maps would be changed. Like the divisions between regions would be completely wrong. So any new chunks you generate would be very janky. The other issue is that biologically Oceania is very different. So Oceania would be Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and Australia, with and probably some like the South Pacific Polynesian islands. The issues with those regions is that they're like the biology there is very, very different. So especially in Australia, the only placental mammals that you have in Australia, I mean, the 3 main placental mammals that weren't introduced in the last 200 to 300 years are bats, humans, and dingoes. Dingoes have been there for around 5,000 years. They're actually apparently genetically found to be like descendants of feral dogs brought over by humans. Humans have been in Australia for probably around 50,000 years. Before that, though, there was just bats. And all the animals we have right now are all placentals. So that means that we don't just have like variations of existing animals. I can't just say like there's no bear, there's no deer, there's no wolf, there's no goat, sheep, cow, none of that. So if you want the region to feel fleshed out, you have to implement new animals. Now there are birds, so maybe some, pheasant equivalent could work. Some ground birds, but we'd have to implement probably kangaroo because you probably couldn't do it without a kangaroo. I'd have to see. In other regions, I have kind of gone for kind of like Pleistocene animals. Like we have horses in the Americas. So that might be the direction we go in. Although most megafauna in Australia has been extinct for around 50,000 years, or a little less, pretty much since humans arrived. But definitely with kangaroos, probably going to have emus, maybe cassowaries, could have moas, could have kiwis, because we're doing Oceania. At some point, probably going to implement crocodiles or something like it, so that those could be in Australia. But I have to come up with like a solid list of the animals I want to implement, and then do the texturing, do the modeling, do the animations for them, and all of that. And so that's a big thing. And then the other question that I mentioned earlier is, how do you implement the region without forcing a rewrite of all the maps? So what I might do is actually make it so that Europe generates its Oceania in the southern hemisphere. The justification being that of the current regions we have, Africa, Asia, and Americas, Europe is the only one that in real life is exclusively a northern hemisphere region. Africa crosses the equator, Asia crosses the equator, Americas crosses the equator. Europe does not. and Oceania does not. Oceania is exclusively a southern hemisphere region. So what it might just be is that Oceania will just generate in place of Europe south of the equator. And that is not too far from an idea I had before, is I might actually do something similar with the other regions. Like I might sort of split Americas up. Just that, like, because I've been thinking about adding llamas. And I might have those generate in the Americas exclusively south of the equator. Most Americas animals will be available on both sides. Llamas might be the exception. And then Oceania might be only found in the southern hemisphere, and Europe might be only found in the northern hemisphere.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I guess one other thought is it's my understanding that we're actually in morning here, that historical sugarcane was actually originally native to Pacific Islands and was then brought to Southeast Asia a few thousand years ago by humans. And now, if that's the case, then that would mean that sugarcane would actually be an Oceania exclusive crop, which might be a nice thing to do because, as it stands, I'm not really sure what kind of crops we'll have in Oceania. Maybe taro or something like that. Sorry, next question.
So from Phantom Fury, are there any plans with villagers or other forms of alternate civilization?
I've been thinking about it. Possibly. I'm not sure how it'll feel to do it. If I do have them, they'll probably be exclusively kind of Mesolithic or early Neolithic. So probably pre-agriculture, maybe pre-pottery, maybe not pre-pottery in terms of tech. So it's not going to be like vanilla villages where you spawn into the world, you show up, and then you start raiding them for iron or diamonds or whatever. There may be a mechanic. You might be able to raid them for food. Probably be a mechanic where they care about you stealing from them. Probably be a mechanic where you trade with them. And now this is just all hypothetical. I'm not even sure I want to do this. So possibly be trading with them. Now, the one thing that I kind of like about the idea, and I don't think they'd be like the vanilla kind of villagers. But one thing that I kind of do like about the idea of villagers is I've been thinking about automation. And there's a lot of mods focus on automation. But one thing that I thought would be kind of interesting as a different way to do automation, and I mean, I'm not super familiar with how other mods work, but would be if automation in TFC meant finding villagers, gaining their trust, and then hiring them with like food or whatever, or trade goods in order to get them to do the work for you. So instead of automations just meaning machines, it would mean like mobs that walk around and do stuff for you, like, you know, farm your fields or you know, process your ores or however it ends up working. Because I think that's like an interesting mechanic to have. And that would mean that you'd have to be generating a ton of food in order to feed them. But that's just an idea. I'm not sure if that would ever get implemented.
Right.
But I just think like that's kind of a cool idea.
And then from Jerome226, when is the cool Nether coming? And then several exclamation points, a question mark, an ampersand, and 3 question marks.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the Nether is, because that's late game content, I want to get the kind of mid game, early late game content done first. So, because I think that's just the order things have to go in. So probably not for a while. I am now, as everyone may know, back from Japan. Back in Canada, have my proper setup again. and a new computer. So looking to get back into things. I really wanted to get some coding work done in Japan, but it was a hard time. It was gone, left in the morning around 8:30 every day, and came back between 7 to 8 at night, and just exhausted. It was not an easy job. So that took more of a toll on me than I hoped. So yeah. But hopefully, it's been a year and a bit since an update has come out, but looking to get back into things.
Okay. From Minecraft 16.
Okay.
Are there any plans to make cave generation depend on the rock type? Karst caves and limestone and dolomite versus lava tubes and extrusive things, fissures and certain rocks, etc.
Yes. Yeah, I do actually have plans for that. I do want to make limestone generate better and bigger caves. That is something that I would enjoy doing. Like I said, I'm going to be working with cave generation, implementing the ore tunnels so that it's more fun to explore caves. I'm not far enough in the process yet to know exactly how that's going to happen, so there's not much else I can say, but yeah. Rock-dependent cave generation is a plan.
Okay. And then from Mount, are there any plans to put TFC Plus on Modrinth?
On what
Which
now?
is some Modrinth? It's, I don't know, it's something that they use. Yeah, it's a...
So...
it's a launcher of some kind.
I mean, if someone can tell me why that's a good idea, sure. But, like, I don't know what that is, so...
Yeah, it's like the launcher in library.
The hell?
It's an alternative to CurseForge, I guess.
Ah, okay, yeah. All right. Sure. I don't know.
And then there's this one from Snarky, which was what is the current list of work in progress features and what will come out next, which you kind of answered in another one, but he clarifies with what is like nearly done and what's like after what you're about to finish.
All right, so nearly done. So we're having question. So features that are nearly done. So there's a lot of changes with grass and terrain here. I don't remember actually how many of these were in the previous version, but you can see we have different sizes of grass, different colors of grass. I'm really happy with the grass changes. We are having crops are going to have, like, the color of the crop is going to be variable depending on the color of the grass in the region, so that the crops will blend in a bit better. That's definitely coming out in the next update. We're going to have these barrel mechanic changes. We're having the weather system. We're having... there's going to be a watering can coming out the next update, which will allow you to manually water crops if you want to grow crops away from water. And in a region that doesn't have enough natural rainfall to support the crops. That will mean, like, going out and, like, consciously watering the crops every day. And you might have to water them more depending on how much water they need. Along with that, there will be a bee smoker. So the way that you interact with beehives is going to be different. Where instead of just building a campfire underneath them, it's going to be like a version of the watering can. You're going to stuff it with straw, light it on fire, and then use that to blow smoke on the hives in order to calm the bees down enough to take a look inside. So that system is going to be different. So it'll mean, like, you'll need pottery in order to interact with beehives. You won't be able to do it from the beginning of the game, but it will be a faster mechanic than the current one, which is where you have to, like, set up a little fire underneath them, and then, like, that takes a while. As long as you have your bee smoker on your hotbar or whatever, you can just light it up and smoke the bees if you pass by them to get the fertile comb out. And I might take a look at how bees work. So yeah, it'll be the barrel rework, the weather system, changes to crop rendering, the coal, which includes underclay, which is a new system. The coke, I guess there's also coke and coke ovens being implemented here. And I don't know, like I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that little minor changes that I've forgotten. Before I put out the next update, I'm going to do like run like a C diff, or not C diff. I think that's like a, is it C diff, or is that like a,
C. diff's a disease.
yeah, bowel disease? I was going to say, no. There's a F diff. I don't know. There's like a program you run. Once I compile the code, it'll compare line by line the newly compiled, or the new code to the old version, and then I'll be able to write a change log that notes down exactly like every difference, because I can go through it line by line and just see what I changed. Yeah, so that will be what's coming out the next update. I'm not sure when that's going to come out. Barrels are looking like they're going to be a lot of work, and there's still a bunch of texturing work to do for the crops, but hopefully it won't be too long.
Okay, that is everything.
Wasn't there a big question that you skipped?
That was Snarkies, which you just answered.
Oh, that was it just now?
Yeah. I didn't know how long you're going to talk about it. So.
Yeah, there's a lot to go on, but again, like it's been a year since we've really worked on this, so with any gusto. So my memory is not, not super reliable in that way.
Oh, you changed spears, didn't you?
Yes, there's a change to spears now. In fact, you know what? Can we? There's one of these cheats. All right. Open to LAN. Switch to creative, and then we can look through the creative menu quickly just to finish this off, just to talk about, because there's going to be some new stuff in here. So let's see. What do we have that's new? Just going through. Gems, tools. Yeah. Rich coal. Small coal. Locked logs. Stacked logs. Spears. Blah, 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 blah. Mud. Yeah, so we can talk about the changes that making to spears. So currently, you just sharpen the end of a pole to get a spear. That is actually going to make like a wooden stake now. So those are not weapons. Those are just going to be, oh yeah, the plow. Those are just going to be, yeah, I need to implement the shorts. Yeah, it looks like there was some, it's going to be like, I guess that's not out yet. That was so long ago. There's going to be, basically, you'll be able to make any clothing type out of any material now. So if you want to make fur shorts, you're perfectly capable of doing that. Or you will be able to be. Yeah, so the wooden stake, which will stack normally, won't be a weapon. You'll be able to use that to make the teepees if you want. That's going to simplify that system. And then you're going to burn the tip of it in a campfire in order to turn it into a spear. So that's like carbonizing the tip of it, which just makes it a little bit stronger. And I kind of like that feature, because just makes it a little, yeah, wooden spear bundle. So we have the pole, the wooden spear, and the wooden stake, and then the wooden spear bundle. So the bundle is going to be specifically for the spears, and then the wooden stake will be its own item. I think that might.
Oh, speaking of shorts, is the solar coverage thing?
I'm not sure. That might not be in this update. That might be in a future update.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah. Okay. So
right, yeah, that's everything.
all right. Wonderful. All right, guys. If you have any more questions, you can leave them below. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see all y'all next time.